Hi, Misha here, and today let's talk about the 3 Federation Starfleet ships that Eaglemoss managed to do for lower decks before Eaglemoss went out of business, and kind of the stories behind them. So we have the Parliament class USS Vancouver, we have the Luna class USS Titan, and of course we have the California class, Cali class USS Cerritos. And the Cerritos is the XL version. If I'm being honest, I would have preferred the standard size just to kind of fit in with everything else, but beggars can't be choosers, and it was literally cheaper to get the XL than the standard model because it was on the Master Replica website, and I could only find the standard size on eBay, and it was, of course, you paid the tax. Anywho, let's start with the Luna class USS Titan because it has such an interesting story behind it, and it took 15 years to become truly canon. And before we talk about the version from Lower Decks, let's revisit the original from Eaglemoss and the concept. This was one of the bonus editions because at the time this was a beta canon ship. In fact, this wasn't even designed by Paramount, Star Trek, whatever, although they did lay out the specifications for it. So this goes all the way back to the most successful film ever, Star Trek Nemesis, 2002, 2003 period. Finally, at the end of that, Riker gets his own ship, and it is named the USS Titan. That's the only info dropped. Well, in 2004, 2005, it's clear that there will not be another Next Generation film, and that the current series, Enterprise, is coming to an end. So books are the next thing, and Riker's adventures are meant to take place in a book series. And they need a USS Titan for covers and promo art, that kind of thing. So a competition is announced, and therefore amateurs and fans can submit designs. Now, the powers that be do give some specifications. Riker's ship is to be an explorer, not a combat ship, otherwise you just get a lot of souped up defiant submissions. And it's actually meant to be quite small, about 450 meters, so not quite half the length of a Sovereign, but 2/3. And it's only going to have a crew of 300, 350, rough, just to give people an idea. So, a deep space explorer. One of the people to submit a design was Sean Turingano, and it would win. The competition ended in August of 2005. He was announced as the winner, and his design here would appear on the cover of the first book in 2007. And yeah, it would be known as the Luna class, which was actually an unofficial class name. And unofficially, the lead ship was the USS Luna, NX 80101, later redesignated NCC 80101 after its shakedown cruise. These would all be named for moons, and the first production batch were to be named after moons in the Sol system, obviously Titan. And it was in beta canon for all those years, and when Eaglemoss did this issue, it was a beta canon ship, but it was a popular one. It kind of has a Miranda vibe going on with some Sovereign. Some people say it has Sovereign. I get the connection, but it doesn't scream Sovereign to me. Maybe it's the squared flat nacelles. But it's definitely kind of a Miranda variant, complete with a pod on top and deflector below. Pretty conventional design, but it fits in. And I'm sure he's very proud of his work. It was picked up on Star Trek Online and became quite a popular ship with lots of subclasses. But it looked like it would just kind of remain there for a long time. That is, until the Star Trek revival, of course with Discovery, which would not impact this for a while. But then with Picard and Lower Decks, it was an opportunity for the USS Titan to appear with Riker, and for the Luna class in general to shine. And in 2020, it finally became truly canon. And so now we can put the Lower Decks version. This is not an XL, this is just standard on the spinny thing. And as you can see, it's very, very similar to the original design. Although there are a few differences. It was updated a bit. But then you go to animation, it was kind of downgraded a bit when it comes to things like windows, back and forth. Either way, we see it in multiple episodes of the show so far. And it holds true to the original design. So what's the in-universe history? In the late 2360s, around 2369, the Federation Starfleet was busy working on an anti-Borg fleet. The Defiant was kind of the first. The Saber was a more conservative design, but still there. The Steamrunner, the Norway. But there was still a desire for a deep space exploration, long endurance mission craft. And that's where the Luna design comes in. Work began at Utopia Planitia on a fast, smart, reasonably well-armed ship that could really go out, doing 5-year missions, kind of the classic thing. They didn't want the whole Starfleet to turn into defensive warships. Unfortunately for the Luna design, the Dominion War would soon happen, not to mention the Borg incursion before that. So the plans were shelved after a couple of years of development, but they were picked back up in the year 2375 after the end of the Dominion War. And the USS Luna herself, NX, like I said, 80101, was finished up, and she went for her shakedown cruise in the year 2377. And soon thereafter, her first sister ship, the USS Titan here, NCC 80102, would join the fleet. By the way, Sean would actually make this registry number, and it would continue on all the way through to Lower Decks, so that's kind of cool. And Riker would take command of her in the year 2379 and seemingly be her first captain. Maybe she had a shakedown cruise captain, but he would be her first full captain going into deep space missions. And these would be used to explore the Gamma Quadrant, now with peace with the Dominion, and also be used as kind of peacekeepers in Cardassian space after the destruction of the government there. So they could do dual roles, but no, this was meant to be an explorer craft, which kind of explains her not tiny but not huge crew. Sean kind of kept with the thing. Officially, this is 454 meters long. Has a total of 23 decks, including the pod on top, and has a crew commensurate around 300 to 350. And one thing that's talked about in the books is that the crew is very diverse, with one of the highest percentages of aliens in the fleet. So, diversity there. Her cruise is warp 8. Maximum speed is pretty much like other ships of her era, around 9.8. Maybe squeezing a little more temporarily. Pretty standard layout. A smart, compact design. We have a shuttle bay in the rear of the main hull. But this is also classified as a tactical heavy cruiser. What does that mean? Well, a heavy cruiser of this era would typically be 600, 700 meters long. But a tactical heavy cruiser was a more compact design in the 400 to 450 meters. Think of the USS Prometheus. She was just over 400 meters. And that kind of fills it up. And for her size, the Luna class actually could pack a punch. The pod on top could be a sensor pod, or it could be a weapons pod, and we see it firing photon torpedoes. Has standard phasers on the saucer, and the secondary hull has 2 torpedo tubes capable of launching the newer quantum torpedoes. So at least 4 tubes, giving her quite the punch for her size. And she's got quite good shielding. I don't know if it has a blade of armor or not, but even though it was an explorer, it could defend itself, which is, part of exploration. Look at the old Constitution classes. They were some of the best armed. So yeah, for her size, actually she's the smallest one we're going to look at today. She was pretty stacked. And as we know, Riker liked to play jazz. But it is neat to see Riker's ship. And internally, it kind of looks like an updated Galaxy class, although a little bit smaller in certain areas. And we see a few of these ships throughout the new series. And here's the original standard size from Eaglemoss. And here's the, frankly, standard size for lower decks, just kind of side by side showing you they're very, very similar. We don't just see this in lower decks in Star Trek Online. We also see it in Star Trek Picard. 2 Luna classes are featured in Season 2, and 36 are in the Fleet Day formation in Season 3. We do know that the initial batch was of 6 starships back in 2378, again with Luna and Titan being the first 2. So they did plan to mass produce these, I think, which was part of it. A smaller ship design meant that they could build more of them and send them out in all kinds of directions, eventually even exploring the Delta Quadrant with Voyager's recent return. So I'm okay with the fact of having 36. It'd be one thing if you saw 36 Galaxy classes, but 36 relatively small ships. After all, this is not much bigger than Voyager herself. Voyager was 15 decks and about 350, 380 meters. This is, like I said, 450. And if you take the pod away, roughly 20 decks. So yeah, not much bigger than Voyager. And essentially of the same design, ilk, and era as a smart, sciencey ship. So I'm okay with that. But it does seem like it was a pretty standard vessel in the fleet. Maybe finally replacing the old Mirandas. And in a pinch, it could be used as a tactical support vessel as well. So that's our first lower decks era ship. What do you think if you haven't seen the Luna? It's a really cool story. It's always neat to see a fan design get into the show. The same thing happened with the Olympic class, the USS Pasteur. Let's move on. Next, let's talk about the Parliament class, the USS Vancouver, which honestly we know the least amount about, but it's an interesting design. And this seems to be a little bit of an older design compared with the Luna, but still has kind of that modern aesthetic. So maybe designed in the late 2360s, mid 2360s. Looking at the registries, we might say these were produced right around the same time as the Galaxies, but I've always had reservations. The registry numbers have never been perfectly chronological. And that's okay, because you can easily just say that production blocks were set aside, things were moved around. Even in the real world, that happens a lot. What we know about this ship, it's considered an advanced engineering vessel, kind of a projects vessel, built more for, building things, repairing things, being there. It's not a really combat vessel or even a deep space explorer. To that end, it's only said to have 11 decks, at least in the saucer. It sure looks like it would have more. Then again, it is a pretty flat design. We do know that there are actually turbo lifts and even maybe some habitable space on the warp nacelle struts on the pylons, but they are pretty thick, I'll give it credit. The nacelles themselves are kind of an interesting look. They do resemble the Titan style a bit, kind of boxy. And the deflector kind of has an updated squashed Galaxy going on. I've seen estimates on the length of this anywhere from 500 to 600 meters, but no greater, so it's going to be shorter than a Galaxy and flatter for sure, but also longer, larger than a Luna. We do know that it has quite a large shuttle bay that takes up 2 decks. I believe it's deck 6 and 7 on the saucer, and it carries 9 larger shuttles, not to mention several pods and the Argo craft we famously saw again in Nemesis. And it just has a lot of repair facilities. One, I imagine a lot of work bees, and much like the Luna, it's capable of at least warp 8 sustained for a long period, and definitely over warp 9 for bursts. We don't really know much about its offensive capabilities. I'm not even sure if it carries quantum torpedoes, maybe just photons. Not all ships carry the quantums. I would class this more as a medium cruiser or even support vessel, but an advanced one, a very specialized advanced one with quite a bit of gear, quite a bit of storage bay, cargo bays in the hull, just areas to work and whatnot. So in some ways, doing missions that the old Oberth might have done, or the Miranda, but in a more effective modern way. And that's really what this is kind of combining Miranda with Galaxy and giving a little bit of the Voyager design aesthetic. It really doesn't have the post-Dominion War look. It looks to be a pre-Dominion War design, but just barely. Again, kind of like the Intrepid, to me anyway. What do you think? Interesting design, though. We know of 2 vessels so far in the Parliament class, the USS Vancouver and the USS Toronto. So these seem to be named so far after Canadian cities, but I could see if they built a bunch of these, maybe going to Commonwealth cities, South Africa, New Zealand, what have you. But it doesn't seem like a vessel that was uber-duper mass-produced. Then again, I could be wrong. But it does seem rather specialized, but it seems like it does what it is intended for very well. And so by the year 2380, 2381, this is considered quite a modern, up-to-date ship, if not cutting-edge technology. However, our next and final ship, and the star of the show, is a little more storied. We come to the California, the Cali class. And I want to be honest, for a ship that's been in a show for 4 seasons, we don't know as much about it as you might think. But we still have a good bit of experience on board her. This is considered a support craft, a medium cruiser, and she's not small, about 535 meters long, so about 100 meters and some change shorter than a Galaxy, and she's got quite a large saucer. We know she has about 11 decks in the saucer and at least 20 total, so again, a few more than Voyager, which makes sense. Voyager's a little taller, but she's bigger. And these seem to have been in production quite a while, looking at the range of their registry numbers. They run from 70,000 up to like 87,000. I mean, they were probably produced over a long period. Some are considered kind of old or aging, but others seem pretty new. So it does seem like a class, much like the Excelsior, that's been kept in production a while. Looking at it, it seems like something that was even made before the Galaxy, or maybe right around the same time. And the interiors kind of confirm this, very Galaxy-esque bridge, for example. I will point out that this does have holodecks, 3 of them. Now, it's possible holodecks were retrofitted to ships, but that would seem difficult unless you maybe retrofitted a cargo bay. It's specialist technology, and we know that the holodeck was still new tech for the Galaxy. Therefore, I have to conclude these were introduced around the same time, so 2360, 2365 at the latest. Conjecture there. And that would be kind of borne out by the way the saucer looks. The nacelles are interesting. You know what this kind of reminds me of a little bit, especially with the saucer? The Ambassador class, because it's such a kind of rounded design. I'm sure they were going for more of a Constitution homage, but then again, so was the Ambassador. We don't really know the crew, but it doesn't seem tiny. And again, for over 500 meters, if the Titan had 350, give or take, at 450, we have to assume at least more. So let's say 550 crew. She's kind of flat. She can cruise at warp 8 and can reach speeds in temporary bursts up to about warp 9.3 to 9.4. Then again, she's not meant to go quickly. She does not have quantum torpedoes, just good old-fashioned phasers and photons. For defense, standard shielding, that kind of thing. We have the main shuttle bay in the back, and 2 secondary bays on the saucer. They take up decks, I think it's 5 and 6, with storage on deck 7. She carries 5 larger shuttles and several smaller ones, plus she has a handful of the Argo craft as well. Because, yeah, she was kind of meant for the same role as the Vancouver, at least a little bit. In fact, one kind of fun fact about the Kali class is it has striping on the hull that indicate its specialty, which makes sense. We talked about the pod on the Luna being swappable. We've seen it before with the Nebula class. So having modular vessels makes perfect sense to set them up for a different role. When we meet the Cerritos, she has the yellow or mustard color striping, which puts her in the engineering division, meaning she's set up for engineering projects. This is known in the show. She's a second contact ship, which is a joke, which actually makes perfect sense though. Yeah, first contact's there, you say hello, swap letters, but then you come back and see what they need or what you can get from them, and so more engineering stuff would be necessary. Support craft, basically. If a Kali class has blue markings, she would be in the science/medical. So if science was needed for maybe studying a nebula or a phenomenon near an area for duration, or yeah, if there was a plague outbreak, we could have used one of these in orbit when COVID was happening, couldn't we? She'd be there. So these vessels are kind of meant to hang around longer. Your heavy cruisers like the Galaxy Sovereign, they'll pop in for a day, a week, but they won't stay a month or 6 months. A Kali class will and can, which kind of explains why she does have 3 holodecks for entertaining the crew. Also an arboretum and citation operations, things like that. Just more kind of live-a-day stuff and room for the crew, because she might be parked in the same area for a bit. Although some have a little bit more exciting lives. Ones with red stripes are often called upon to do VIP transport, ambassadors, that kind of thing, or serve as command ships for an area, because I mean, this is a relatively large craft. So the red stripy ones are more in that field, but they could also be stuck over a planet for weeks or months while negotiations drag out too. So yeah, fun times. We could use one of these in orbit right now to pick a Speaker of the House. See, Kali classes, they're actually useful, which does explain why these are kept in production for so long. Looking at registries, if we try to go by those at all, they're into the 80,000s, meaning they're produced around the same time as the Lunas, meaning at least a 15-year production run. We don't know how many total were made, but in 2381, the quote-unquote whole fleet comes, and there are, I believe, 33 members in total, counting the Cerritos. And we do know that at least a couple of Kali classes were lost before this time, and presumably some have been decommissioned or otherwise scrapped. So they at least built 36, 40, 50, who knows. Because it is a little larger and maybe a little more complicated, it might be a little more expensive to produce than other vessels. But yeah, I should also point out that since Eaglemoss barely got a chance to make these before going out, this resembles more Season 1 Lower Decks. With Season 2 and 3, they kind of slightly redesigned the CGI, the animated model. So there are some small differences, but you get what you get. And like I said at the beginning, honestly, I kind of like to have the standard edition, but why would I pay more for a smaller ship? That doesn't make sense. This one wasn't a bad deal. I think it was like $55. It's heavy too. So, what do I think of these, both the designs themselves and the Eaglemoss models? Let's get them off the stands. Let's begin with the Vancouver, just because it's the one I'm least familiar with and the kind of the one we know the least about. Taking it off, it's light, but it is a pretty slim little ship. Kind of reminds me of a lot of the Discovery ships. They're kind of this stretched out light. It's about that size. That's not bad. The saucer's still metal, but this all is plastic. Yeah, it is one of the lighter ships that Eaglemoss has done, especially for Federation. But part of it could just be it was at the tail end of their product run and they were trying to, I hate to say make as cheap as possible, but yeah, make as cheap as possible. Part of it could have been the detailing, to get the detailing the way they wanted it. Because plastic, or ABS, plastic, does hold detail better than cast metal. I do like the saucer, excuse me, the deflector dish on this. Kind of interesting design. And the nacelles are interesting too. They do have a bit of a disco Bassard collector, but then you come back here and it reminds me of a lot of the Borg fleet nacelles. Yeah, this would definitely fit in with the whole Borg fleet. Also some of the Star Trek Online ships. I actually really like this simple design. It is very simple. Even though in the show this is considered more advanced than the Cali, it may be one of those things where it feels smaller, frankly. Maybe it's smaller but smarter, or just, you know, better at the one thing. But it does feel like more of a specific craft versus a multi-role. I know what it reminds me of. It kind of reminds me of the Centaur class. One of the neater designs. Yeah, it's like a Centaur, but yeah, because I'm not going to say it reminds me of a Nebula. It's a little too spindly for that. But that's not a ding against it. I think the Centaur is one of the coolest. What do you think? Time for Riker's Titan. Even though this is smaller than the Parliament, it feels chunkier. It's also a heavier model. A lot more metal going on. That's plastic, but then you get to the back, that's metal, plastic. Yeah, I think even the pylons are metal, so that's, yeah, it's basically the nacelles and the pod are plastic. Of course your deflector, but then pretty much metal. Even though this is shorter, it's a taller ship than the rest. So I can believe this having 23 decks with some sources say the Vancouver only has 11, and if some of those decks are tall because of engineering stuff, I could believe that. Now, I've always thought this is a cool design. Again, it's not revolutionary, but it fits really well in with the fleet, and it's a little ambiguous. It has some features of the anti-Borg fleet, some Voyager features, some Sovereign features, but it's also some kind of old school Miranda features, and it's got very standard looking Bassard collectors, and you realize just how thin they are. They're very, very thin Bassards. And then the deflector, it's very Sovereign-esque, but not quite. Again, it fits in with the anti-Borg fleet. No, I really like this one. This is a cool model. Glad I picked this up. And again, I actually bought this on the Master Replica site, so I didn't pay crazy prices. It also kind of wiggles into its stand pretty well too, and has a good rake on it, so it's not going anywhere, which is good because of how heavy it is. But of course, our third one's even heavier. Getting to the XL Cerritos here, I've noticed you really have to pop the stand in. If you just try to set it on there, it kind of wiggles around. not bad. It hasn't fallen off on me, but if you just kind of press it a bit, it'll make a small pop, and then kind of goes in there fine. And then this kind of comes out, if I can get it here. I've noticed that with mine, at least, I like to squeeze it, just to squeeze the stand in just a bit, and it'll come out. One thing I think Eaglemoss was always smart about, they always made the stands out of a softer material than the plastic of the ship. So if something's going to break, it's going to be the stand, not the die-cast ship or even the plastic. So yeah, if that's happened a time or two, something gets pressure on it on the shelf and gets too much and gets loaded, the stand will break and the ship's fine. And that's a good idea. I don't know if they intended that. If they didn't, it has a happy coincidence, but if they did, good thinking. So yeah, I was really curious what the hero ship of the show looks like. I'll admit, Lower Decks is not my favorite show, but it's gotten better and it's consistent and it's fun. And it's nice that most Star Trek fans are enjoying it, so there's not all that kind of... I actually liked Picard, at least Season 3 and even Season 2. Season 1, okay, yeah, it's a little, yeah. But anyway, so this is the ship. Like I was saying, the saucer is very traditional because it's a true saucer, round style. And we don't really see these much anymore. The Ambassador is one of the last. And I think this takes after it. Even the way the saucer rim kind of slopes out is very ambassadory. Interesting fact, the bridge is not on deck 1, but deck 2. Meaning deck 1 is probably more of a utility deck. And then it's really neat that there's really like nothing on the saucer. It's pretty just there. The saucer is the main part of the ship, which kind of makes sense for this design. And it does give it kind of an older style look. Again, I would really say pre-Galaxy because of that, but not much because of the holodeck situation. We also know it has half a dozen conference rooms, which makes again sense for this ship role, and multiple cargo bays, storage bays, areas that can be transformed into other things. It has 8 transporter rooms, again for a ship that might be called on for engineering, medical, or diplomacy. Having lots of transporters makes sense. And of course it has sick bay on deck 8 with the cat doctor, which I think is hilarious. You know me and cats, and I like cats. I like dogs too, but I love animals, and I think some of the scenes there are great. As a cat owner. Okay, so things. The secondary hull is interesting. It is tiny. It's down here. It kind of reminds me of the secondary hull of a nebula. The deflector is very Galaxy style, maybe even proto-Galaxy. And again, the main shuttle bay being back here. Although it's not going to have a ton of room for extra storage, which makes sense why there were 2 additional shuttle bays in the saucer, plus storage for them on deck 7. So yeah, 3 smaller bays instead of 1 or 2 larger ones makes sense. The connective tissue of this to this and this to this with the cutout struts. I'm not sure why you would cut out your pylons. It just seems kind of like negative space for no reason, but okay. It does have a little bit of a disco Constitution vibe going on there. Of course, we do have the cutouts back here too, so it's part of the aesthetic. The nacelles are very TMP to me, with the slope in the back and then the very square boxy. What's unique to me, and the one feature I'm maybe a little undecided on, are the Bassard collectors. These rounded things are very different. That's the one thing that I can't think of any other Federation ship that it's like. Maybe I'm forgetting something, but I think they kind of looked at the TMP with its boxy front end and thought, well, let's make it a round front end. So the transition from box to round. The nacelles have a very interesting look. Some part of this ship's almost make it look like it could work as a tug. You know what I mean? These look like powerful engines. I mean, they're a good portion of the ship's overall length. It's like, yeah, I really could see this having a powerful tractor beam, at least for its day and time. And it's tucked up in there. No, generally speaking, I like the design. And this XL version is heavy. That's all metal. Your lower section, I believe, is all plastic. Yeah. So yeah, metal saucer, plastic lower. So all your weight's up here. That's okay though. I don't know how they could do this in metal. Let's see here, getting it back on the stand. So I just like to squeeze it in, get it up this hole. Try to get it more or less centered here. There, see, so there's kind of a little pop it makes. It will creak, but part of it is this table's not perfectly even. On the shelf, it's fine. It doesn't ever come off. Even if it does kind of slip off, it'll probably get caught by that. So yeah, my first really look at the Cerritos, the California class. Let's wrap this up. So overall, what do I think of these 3 ships from Lower Decks? I was a little reluctant to get into these because I didn't know if doing animated versions, if they would be too cartoony, if they'd fit in with the fleet. So I first picked up the Titan, liked it. It's probably my favorite model of the 3, like the actual physical model. And so yeah, then I found the Vancouver and the Cerritos. Actually, they went out of stock, and I thought, oh crap. And then what Master Replicas will do, they'll say, oh, some things came back into stock, probably canceled ordered, so I went and grabbed them. I did not get the shuttle. I don't really like shuttles at this scale. Consider that the other shuttle packs are not only the normal small scale, but most of them are the small, you know, the sterile scale. It would bug me having all the other shuttles, like the Type 6s, the Type 8s, in that small scale, 2 inches or so, and then having the Yosemite shuttle for this at 6-7 inches. I just, personal preference plus the cost. If they ever do a small version of the shuttle, I'll pick it up, but I'm good. I didn't pick up the Disco shuttle either for the same reason, or the Work Bee. I don't know, some things are nice on the small scale, some things are nice on the big scale. So, yeah. Trying to think of any final thoughts. The Parliament is a simple, clean design. I like that, but I am a little surprised how light the model is. It's not a complaint, just an observation. The Titan, I already knew what it looked like, but I like how they did it scaled up and how heavy it is. Plus, come on, it's a Riker ship. And again, the Cerritos, I like the XL. The normal one I would have been fine with, but I do like how heavy it is. And I do like the design. It is unconventional, but not so much so that it bugs me. Just unconventional in a charming way. So, while the Titan's my favorite, physical model, I'll give it to the Cerritos for just being different. It gives a certain identity to Lower Decks that the others don't. The Titan was a carryover, that's fine. And the Vancouver is kind of generic Starship. Not in a bad way, but yeah, background. I couldn't see this being a hero ship. This one I can. It has a certain silhouette that's easily identifiable. So we'll see where the show goes. And we'll see if Master Replicas or someone else ever does more. At least we got these. The Texas class would be nice to have after its showing. What do you think, though? Do you like the Lower Decks designs? If so, which is your favorite? And what would you like to see them make next? Let me know in the comments. With that, this is Misha. Catch you very soon next time.